what hour your clock strikes. Here, it's always Halloween. And I'm always your haunted host, Luce Tomlin-Brenner. Welcome to Small Frights Friday. On these episodes, I like to share a curated selection of calls from the All Hallows Hotline and letters from the EEEEKmail bag. We are almost exactly 1 week post when the calendar says it's Halloween. But here on the podcast, we don't care what those dumb calendars have to say. So let's keep the spirit of the season flowing and answer our first question. So this comes to us from Instagram. You can follow us there at itsalwayshalloweenpodcast. And this question comes from the Marred Bard. Hi, Luce. I'm excited for this episode, and I hope you get time to talk about Dia de los Muertos costume appropriation, because as someone of purely white European descent, I've always wondered where the line is between appreciation and appropriation, and for this holiday in particular. I'm really interested in this topic because Dia de los Muertos is so lovely, and I want to be able to pay it the proper respect it deserves. Well, thank you so much for that question and comment. And this was on the post that I made about the history episode that came out on Tuesday that was centered on Dia de los Muertos. And so I didn't get into appropriation on that episode because my Tuesday episodes, I like to focus solely on the history. However, appropriation is definitely an important part of history as well. And before I weigh into this at all, I want to play a call from a listener who is actually of Mexican descent and celebrates the holiday.
Hi, Luce. My name is Maricela from Oakland, California, and I'm a year-round Halloween nut, and actually a member of that spooky girl gang former caller Laura was talking about. But today I'm calling in about Dia de los Muertos. My family is from Mexico. I'm second generation myself, but over the years, my family lost touch with this tradition thanks to the usual process of American assimilation and the centering of Christianity within our childhood home. We grew up aware of Day of the Dead, but understood that we didn't celebrate it as a family because of skulls and all the imagery of death. They were connected to evil and dark and not something you want in the house. But there was a huge shift when my grandfather died, my mom's dad. My mom was struggling to grieve, but slowly she started to build an altar or ofrenda for him. It's almost like my mom didn't know how to grieve until she was faced with the death of someone so close to her. She started making progress with her mourning by using this historical practice as a framework. She started with just pictures of him, but later added the traditional components of the ofrenda, and now just stays up year-round as a tribute to all of our loved ones that have passed on, including our family dog. My sisters and I all have our own ofrendas we build every year with sugar skulls, papel picado, and pan de muerto. I paint my face and dress up like Calavera Catrina to attend community Dia events. And we carry this tradition on because we want future generations to cherish something that we had lost. And I can't speak for everyone, but I feel like Mexican or Latinx, Latine Americans are going through this reclaiming or protection of this holiday. Dia ends up being mistakenly lumped into Halloween, and it's been a huge part of costume and cultural appropriation conversations. There are some similarities between Dia and Halloween, yes, but the main difference is, like you said on your most recent episode, that our Mesoamerican ancestors had to fight to keep this tradition alive, and we continue to keep this tradition sacred in the United States. It's a sacred practice, and for me, the holiest celebration in my entire year. So just throwing it out there to the fellow listeners to spread the word that Dia is real for us. The sugar skull skeletons aren't meant to be spooky or scary or a joke, but rather a celebration of the communal experience of death and remembering our loved ones. I welcome others outside of the culture to participate with the understanding that the cultural, historical, and emotional components are at the center of this holiday. Thank you, Luce, for speaking to the history of Dia. It helps to give more context and understanding to those who aren't familiar. Love the show.
I cannot thank you enough for that incredible call. I listened to it several times and it really moved me. I was so interested to learn about your mother's experience and your experience growing up, both, not being encouraged to celebrate and then finding your way to it and doing it with your sister and, wanting to preserve it for future generations. I just found it so moving and beautiful and important. And these are exactly the kinds of calls that I want and exactly the kinds of stories I want to share with our audience because I am a white woman. I care very much about every different type of cultural celebration around the world. It's so important to me to highlight them in a meaningful and respectful way. And that being said, I am limited by my own experience and knowledge. And there's, teaching people about it is one thing, but hearing about people's lived experiences is just so valuable. And it just pushes out the experience of this podcast and brings so much more life to it. So truly, thank you for the time that you took to share that with us. And I hope that answers a question about appropriation that our Instagram commenter had. I did a little more reading. I Googled white people wearing Dia de los Muertos costumes just to see what I would get from that. And I got a lot of really interesting opinion articles and lots of different interviews with people. So again, it's important to recognize that no group is a monolith and that we are going into celebrations from other cultures with the knowledge that we are outsiders. And I say we because I am white. I'm speaking to my fellow white people. And we cannot center ourselves. Where we are invited or allowed to come into a celebration, we need to come with the utmost respect and realize that we are guests there. And it's not our time to act up. It's not our time to harass other people about what they're wearing. I read an article that a young man was talking about how he was yelled at by a white dude about wearing a sombrero, even though he is Mexican, and chose to wear a sombrero to connect him to his culture based on what he said in this article. And that boggles my mind, but I read story after story of Mexican people being harassed in America at their own Dia de los Muertos festivals. It's completely unacceptable. So it's less about, not wearing the costume. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. I welcome all calls, all input on this. Based on what I heard from our caller and what I've read in several Google searches, it seems like it's less about white people not wearing the costume and more about us not bringing Halloween into Dia de los Muertos because they're totally separate holidays. So not bringing gore and, frightening images into it because it's not about darkness and terror. It is about joy and celebration of the cycle of life. And just don't try to make yourself the freaking star of a holiday that doesn't have to do with you. Appreciate it as an honored guest. Just like when you get invited over to someone's house for a holiday dinner, you don't start commenting on their decor, or you shouldn't. Don't do that. Don't make me slap your wrists. We're trying to be joyful over here, but reading about all the racism that Mexicans have endured at their own celebrations from white people is making me feel really heated right now. So, you just can't, you can't wear the costumes if you're going to harass them about the way they're wearing their costumes. You can't want to eat their food and put out an altar and use their language if you're going to be racist and you're going to support policies and people that are racist, and basically be a new colonizer. Don't be a modern colonizer. All right. Thank you so much for your calls and comments and for educating us. It is much needed and very much appreciated. Our caller also sent in some pictures that I'm going to share on our Instagram. I'm a little behind on Instagram. Please forgive me. I got swept up in enjoying Halloween just like y'all did. So I actually have back pictures. So hopefully I'll be flooding the feed with those soon. All right. Next up, we have a letter. Hello, Luce. I just found your podcast and I am glad to have found it. It's just what the doctor ordered as far as I'm concerned. I'm an avid fan of Halloween ever since I was a kid. I always look forward to the fall season because it's cooler, there's the scent of leaves and wood smoke in the air, and I love the Halloween decorations in my neighborhood. Every year, I always get another Lemmick Spooky Town figure for my collection. Always something new each year. I hate to see Halloween go away, even though I know it will be back next year. I am Scotch-Irish, so I feel a bit of that Celtish pull. I also have spooky computer games that I love to play during the season. Being a church attendee, I really regret hearing pastors preach against Halloween. And when they say it should never be given a place in any person's life, I don't understand it. The church that I go to won't even let their children believe in Santa Claus. I am sorry, but that is so wrong. Children are not allowed to be children anymore. I'm so glad I got to believe in Santa and I was allowed to go trick-or-treating when I was a kid. That's one of those things these rabid church people cannot take away from me, my childhood. I will always be a kid at heart, despite being a college professor and soon-to-be author. It's a tough world out there, and depriving children of the magic of being a kid is even tougher. I wonder why these hell, fire, and brimstone preachers don't squawk about banning Christmas. That holiday was pagan once upon a time, too. Or did they not even bother to look that fact up? Keep on keeping on. Hauntingly yours, Tom Urquhart. Well, Tom, thank you so much for that spirited email. I'm so happy that you found us also. I'm wondering if maybe you should find a new, more welcoming church to go to, and I'm bummed that you have to hear them preaching against a holiday that you like. Perhaps I misunderstood and you're talking about other churches, not the one that you attend. Hopefully that is the case. And yes, I will be getting into some of the similarities between Christmas and Halloween and the pagan festivities as we roll a little closer. And I do agree it's important to keep the magic alive for children in any way possible. Congrats on your soon-to-be-released book. And thanks again for writing in and being such a dedicated listener. I hope that we're able to continue to help you feel spooky even after the calendar says Halloween is over. Up next, we have a call with some more spooky, cozy movie recommendations, which I'm so psyched about. You guys really took this homework on and have been bringing so many different types of Halloween-themed films to our attention, many of which I've never heard of before. Now, take it away, caller.
Yes, first and foremost, thank you for your podcast. It's been very entertaining and very educational. And I would like to add a movie that you didn't mention that I find brings back a lot of memories, back from the 1980, I believe is when it was. And it was called The Dark Night of the Scarecrow. I don't think many people would find it very spooky in today's standards, but it doesn't have all the blood and guts of a lot of these sillier movies as of late, but has a great creep factor. So again, it was a movie. It was shown on TV. My brother and I got to watch it with our parents, and just finally recently found it on Blu-ray and DVD, and I think it's even available on Amazon to rent and watch. So, Dark Night of the Scarecrow, I strongly recommend it. Thank you again.
Amazing. Thank you so much for telling us about this movie. I've never heard of it. I looked it up on IMDb. First of all, it has a delightful poster with a quote from Vincent Price on it. It says, "Marvelous. I was terrified." I mean, what more do you need to hear? Plus, there's this really cool newspaper ad for it that's also on the IMDb. And it says, "An all-new chiller for Halloween. What has this girl done that is driving the town mad? What is the terrible act the people are about to commit? And who is the only person who can save her?" Oh my goodness, I want to be watching this right now. Evidently, it was on CBS at 9 p.m. Around Halloween in 1981. So this is very cool. I recommend everybody check it out on IMDb just to see all the original advertisements and artwork. And I'll post some of those on the Instagram as well. And yes, it looks like you can get it on Amazon, but you have to sign up for a Con TV account. But it looks like you can do a trial and then just cancel it. Thank you so much, caller. I'm happy to hear that you're enjoying the podcast, and I'm very grateful to you for adding to our growing list of spooky Halloween films. All right, now we have 2 back-to-back letters. Hi, Luce. My name is Clarence, and I just started to listen to your podcast. I enjoy it very much. I do have a pet peeve, though, about your October 15th podcast. You talked about making a papier-mâché mask. It's a great idea, but you said to make a Frankenstein mask. What you described was the monster. I know most people call the monster Frankenstein, but in the book, Frankenstein is the doctor. It's Hollywood that began calling the monster Frankenstein. I know it's a small thing, but a podcast on Halloween should make those small things count. I hope I don't come off as an ass, but as a lover of books, I think it's important to keep the source material alive, or in this case, undead. Love the podcast. Keep up the good work. Is your name Clarence, or is your name my mom? Because my mom is the #1 fan of Frankenstein, and she has also corrected me about this my entire life. I don't think that you're being an ass. I decided to include this letter and not ignore it because of your sweet tag there on the end, and I know that you're right. I hope by now that y'all see that I get very psyched sometimes on these Small Frights episodes that are not as diligently written ahead of time as my history episodes are. And sometimes I don't say the right thing. I try very hard, but it doesn't always happen. So thank you for looking out. I do agree that as a Halloween history podcast, I should care about those little details. And you know what? I do. I'm going to put my pride aside and I'm going to say, you're right, Clarence. That was my mistake. I definitely meant Frankenstein's monster. And I do want people to care about that in the same way that you care about that. Thank you very much for listening. I'm glad you're enjoying the podcast and that my flub that I didn't lose all credibility with that flub. And I do appreciate you writing in. And I hope that you can appreciate a little good-natured ribbing right back, because it's hard to be told when you're wrong about something that you didn't think was that big of a deal, but then you have to admit it is kind of a big deal. And oh my God. Oh. It's actually not that hard to admit that you're wrong. People should do it more. I'm wrong. You're wrong. Everyone's wrong. Normalize it. And now we have another letter. Hi, Luce. I just wanted to comment on the story about painting rocks from your last Small Frights episode. Yes, people in the U.S. do paint rocks, especially kids, and they leave them in public places for people to find. They do it for all sorts of reasons. Our daughters did it with their Girl Scout troop, and when our son was about 3, we used to find them on one of our small hikes around a lagoon we lived by in Florida. He, of course, loves rocks and brought a small pink one home. The rock in the attached picture is one he painted in kindergarten, and it now resides in a small box with a blanket because he said the rock needs a home. I love the idea of painting them for Halloween, and perhaps we'll paint some and leave them for others to find next year. Thanks so much for the podcast, Dusty. Dusty, thank you so much. I really appreciate hearing about this. I have kids in my life, but none that participate in this tradition, so it's great to hear that that's something people in the U.S. do. I also love the idea of painting Halloween rocks and hiding them around for children to find. So let's make the push to do that for next Halloween, Halloween 2021. Painted rocks coming at ya. All right, we have one last call, and then we're going to be wrapping it up.
I love you very much.
Well, what a sweet surprise. Thanks for the love, listener. I'm really feeling it, and I really needed it this week. So that does it for this Small Frights Friday. If you have a story that you would like to share with us, a memory, a question, anything related to a past podcast, especially Dia de los Muertos themed, please call in to the All Hallows Hotline at 802-532-DEAD and leave me a message, and it might be on a future episode. Or, if you'd rather, you may write me an EEEEKmail at itsalwayshalloweenpodcast@gmail.com. You can also reach out on the new Instagram page at It's Always Halloween Podcast. And you can find me on Patreon at patreon.com/itsalwayshalloween. It's Always Halloween is researched, written, and performed by me, Luce Tomlin Brenner. The editing, theme music, and sound design is by Pete Burns. Thanks, Pete. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at LTB Comedy and Pete at Mittenberries. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe and write us a little review so that other like-minded ghouls can find us. You can also download and listen to our episodes on the NPR One app. Thank you so much for listening to It's Always Halloween, and please come back next time, unless you are a staunch racist who's not trying to change or grow, in which case, leave forever. Thank you.